So in this section, we will be discussing about what is T-SQL, what are various, what do you mean by set theory, what is the predicate logic, and what is the logical order or operations in SQL statements and how they are being performed. Now, SQL language is basically the foundation for various databases that we have been using, whether it is MySQL, whether it is SQL Server, or whether it is Oracle. So SQL is primarily used in all the structured databases that we use in our day-to-day task for managing and storing the data. Now, each and every organization, they have their own variant of that SQL language, and T-SQL is the Microsoft version of SQL language. Similarly, we have other versions for the various other vendors. Oracle have their own, DB2 is having its own, MySQL is having its own. The primary thing that you need to understand here is that though the variants may be different, the basic language commands are same in all the databases that we use. So the primary set of statements such as create, insert, update, delete, select, they are quite similar in each of these databases. So if you are comfortable with one of them, you can work on the statements in any of these databases with minor tweaks here and there. So let us just start with the TSQL, the foundation of the TSQL statement. What is TSQL itself? In this section, we will be basically discussing about various parameter, various elements of the TSQL statements, like what is TSQL, uh, the various categories of TSQL statements, the language elements of the TSQL, what are predicates and operators, functions, variables, expressions, how we use those expressions in SQL statement, control of flow, errors, and transaction. Then we'll be discussing about the comments and what are batch separators. And there is a small demo about various elements that we use in the TSQL statements. Now, TSQL, as we names is suggest, it is basically a short name for Transact SQL. So Microsoft has given its a short name that is T-SQL. It is based on the primary structured query language, SQL, that was initially developed by IBM in 1970s. Now, earlier, when this language was developed, it was developed in partnership with Microsoft. So Microsoft and IBM, they were together partner and they were developing this language. And later on, somehow they got separated and Microsoft developed SQL Server and IBM developed DB2. Though these databases, they are being quite different as far as the name is suggests, but their basic structure is quite similar. And TSQL language is basically based on the standard, ANSI standard and ISO standard. So the basic commands that we have are based on those ISO standards. That means that whatever database you might be using, you will be having the same set of basic commands in all these databases. Now, in industry, we have different types of languages. As I told you that every vendor, they have their own version of the language, such as PL/SQL, SQL Stored Procedure Language, Transact SQL. Microsoft, when they developed it, they named it as T-SQL. They referred it as T-SQL. And it is a query language, though it is mentioned for SQL Server 2012, but it has been in use uh, ever since the SQL Server was developed, and it is being used in the latest version of SQL Server as well, like SQL Server 2022, etc. And SQL language, when we say that, it is declarative in nature. Declarative means that you have to tell that what you want, not how you achieve that. Normally, when we have a programming experience or when we work on any kind of programming language, our focus is basically to define that how a problem is being solved. We define various steps that are executed in order to get the result, in order to solve a particular problem. There we basically focus on that how a particular task is going to be achieved. We define each and every step for that. Whereas when we are talking about declarative language, we are least bothered about that how a database engine is going to fetch that data from the database, how it is going to filter it, how it is going to uh, get that information that we need. We just tell them that we need that information. We just give it a command. So that is what is declarative nature. So we describe what we want. We don't describe the steps of achieving that uh, task. Now, that is what is the basic difference in declarative language. Do any one of you have any programming experience? Okay. So, as far as the programming experience is concerned, I was asking this question because I just wanted to know whether you have been solving the problem in a step-by-step manner, or you just use the declarative command throughout. Now, a procedural statement is something where you define the steps to achieve the task, and declarative is where you just tell what you want. So SQL is of that declarative nature. Now, when we are talking about the T-SQL statements, we have the various categories of the statements. The categories are DML, that is data manipulation language. Then we have DDL, that is data definition language. And we also have data control language, that is to grant the permission to the databases. Now, apart from that, there are more categories, like we also have the transaction control language that controls the transaction. And in some of the scenarios or in some of the references, you may also find something known as data query language. Data query language is basically referring the select statement. And in some of the references, you will find the select statement as a part of DML, that is data manipulation language. In fact, when we are talking about select statement, the purpose of select statement is to query the data. So in some of the references, it is data query language, and in some of the references, it is being specified as a part of DML only, because we only have one statement, that is select statement, as a part of data query language. So they clubbed it into DML itself. So when we are talking about DML, their purpose is to manipulate the data. Manipulating data means that if you already have some information stored in your table, stored in your data, the purpose here is to add a new record into that table, change the existing values of the record, or deleting any of the record. So the purpose here is to manipulate what is there in already stored for you without changing the structure of the data. You are just modifying the values that is stored in that structure. Select statement is used to query the data. Insert is used to insert new records. Update is used to modify the existing records. And delete is used to delete any of the existing records. Then when we are talking about DDL, that is data definition language, the main purpose of DDL here is to define the structure where our data is stored. So the basic purpose here is to create tables, create other database objects such as views, stored procedures, functions, etc. So the purpose of the DDL statement here is we define the structures of the data that we want to store in the uh, tables. Now, the statements that we are using here are create, alter, or drop. Create is to create new structures such as table, stored procedures, functions, views, etc. Alter is to make any changes in the existing objects, such as adding a new column to a table, modifying the data type of an existing table, then deleting any of the column from the table. That kind of changes we make as far as the table is concerned. So in case our object is a table, we perform simply adding new column, removing a column, or modifying a column. But if it is a view, you want to change the definition of a view, you want to change the definition of a stored procedure, then also we use the alter statement. Then we have a drop statement. The purpose of the drop statement is to remove the that object entirely from our database. So that is the main purpose of the drop statement. Then we are talking about the DCL, or the data control language statement. The purpose of the data control language statements is basically to control the access to your data. Now, as far as the data is concerned, a security is quite important as these days for our data. The purpose here is to grant permission to the user so that they can access the data. In case you don't want any one of your organization to be able to view the data, to be able to modify anything in that data, we can deny the permission to the user to perform that action on the data. Similarly, if you have already granted any permission to the data, or a user is already having a permission due to his role membership, then you can revoke that permission with the help of the revoke statement. So the data control language is primarily controlling your security or access to the data. Now, as far as this particular topic is concerned, we are more concerned about the select statement and some portion of the DML statement, not entirely, but some portion of the DML statement. Uh, the course that we are basically discussing about is the querying databases using the SQL statement. So our main concern is about querying the data only. Now, when we are talking about the language, every language, they have their own, you can say, grammar associated with it. So in case you want to learn any, you can say, any language, like a spoken language or any written language or any regional language you want to learn, you have to learn the grammar associated with that language. Now, when we're talking about the T-SQL language elements, the purpose of these elements here basically is to get us familiar with the various objects, various things that we use as a part of the SQL statements. The language elements of T-SQL are predicates and operators, the functions, then the various variables that we create or the existing variables. What is an expression? Patch separator, the control of flow language statements, and comments. So there are various elements associated with the language. So we'll be discussing them one by one. Now first we will be starting off with the predicates and operator. Now when we have to query our data, we have to specify the statements considering what we want to achieve as a result. And there we need to specify the filter clauses. Now, the predicates and operator, they are basically used to filter the data as per our requirement. The various predicates that we can use are in, between, like, etc. The comparison operator that we can use are equal to, like this is an equal to statement here. Then we have greater than, less than, greater than equal to, less than equal to. Similarly, not equal to can be specified in two ways. This is also not equal to, and this one is also not equal to. Then this is not greater than and not less than. Now, in case you are finding this thing initially just information, a lot of information is being loaded over there. Need not to worry about that, as we will be discussing these things one by one while we are performing our practical. Then the logical operators are there. Logical operators are and, or, not. And or not means that combining multiple statement together. And means that if you have different conditions, like for example, I want to fetch all those records where the price is between, say, 100 and 1000. Now, in that case, I need to ensure that the price is greater than 100 and at the same time it is less than 1000. So my conditions will be price greater than 100 and the other condition will be price less than 100. So and ensures that both these conditions are true for a particular record, and only then that record will be shown to you. Similarly, or means either of the two conditions should be true, and not means that uh, if any of the condition is true, resulting into true, not will be simply negating that outcome. So not 5, not true means any result that is out of that range. So that means it will be showing us the record that are less than 100 or the record that are greater than 1000. Then we have arithmetic operators. Arithmetic operators like plus, minus, multiplication, division, and this is the mod operator. Mod operator is basically a modulus operator that is helping us to find out the remainder of a division. So these are the arithmetic operator that we normally use in our SQL calculation, in our expressions. And then we have a concatenation operator. So in case we are using the plus operator with two alphabets or two strings, it will be simply concatenating the results. So when we are using these operators like plus, minus, multiplication, division, it will simply implement, it enforces the operator precedence. Operator precedence depends upon the various rules, such as the BOTMAS rule in case of mathematics. So like for example, multiplication, division, and mod, they have a higher precedence as compared to plus and minus. So in case you, in an expression, if you are using both plus operator and the multiplication operator will be evaluated first, and after that the addition will be performed, right? I hope that is clear up to this level. Any queries or any doubts? Then another kind of language element that we are going to discuss here is the functions. Now T-SQL, it basically provides a set of predefined functions that are already there within the SQL Server database that help you to perform various calculations. Currently, we are not going into the details of each and every function. Uh, for the purpose of information only, we have just listed three categories of the functions here, like string function, date and time function, and aggregate function. String functions are basically used to work on the string based data, that is alphanumeric data, and the date and time functions work on the date and time values. Like in case you want to find out only the year value from the given date, or you want to find out the month value from the given date, for that you can use the date and time function. Similarly, in case you want to perform the aggregation of your data, like you want to perform the totals, you want to find out the averages, and you want to count the values, you can use the aggregate function. So there are various string functions. Some of them are being listed here, such as substring, left, right, len, data length. Now, currently, you need not to worry about that, as we discuss all these things in detail when we follow the entire course curriculum. Then the list of date and time function is there, and then we have the aggregate functions. Next is we are talking about the variables. Now, variables are basically used to hold some values. Uh, they are basically storing some values that are temporarily used during the execution of our queries in case we want to do some calculation. So we may want to store some information in our variable, and in a SQL language, the variables, they must be declared before we can use them. And each of the variable name, it begins with the @ symbol. So you need to define an @ symbol before the name of the variable at the time of its declaration. You may find some other type of variables also, like that begins with the double @. Now this double @ symbol is reserved for the system variable. Like some of the variables, they are already provided by SQL Server that help you to get the system information. Like for example, we have a variable called at version. This variable will tell you the existing SQL Server uh, version that you are using currently. You can also find out the information about the user that is currently logged in, that is using at user. So that kind of variables, they are system variables and are reserved by SQL Server. So you cannot use this at symbol or double at symbol for your own variables. The variables, when we are declaring, you must specify a data type for that variable. Like for example, we are declaring a variable myWhere, and it must be specified with the appropriate data type. Like int here is being used as a data type for this variable. The value that is assigned to this variable is 30. So what we are doing is we are declaring it. For declaration, we use the declare statement, and then we have the name of the variable, its data type int, and the value that we want to assign. Now, the variable that we are declaring, they must be used within the same execution batch. Like for example, you have declared a variable and you want to use it in immediately the next statement. You have to select both the variable declaration as well as the statement where you want to use it together, and then you have to execute it. A batch means a set of statements that are executed together. So what you have to do is you have to highlight all the contents, including the declaration of the variables and the statements where you are using that variable, and then you have to execute it as a single batch. In case by chance you miss the declaration of the variable and you just highlighted the statement where you are using it, you will not be able to access that variable. So variable declaration and its usage must be executed as a single batch. In SQL Server 2008 and the later version, you can declare the variable and initialize it in the same line. Like here, declare at myWhere int, and you can at the same time assign the value. In the earlier version, before SQL Server 2008, this was to be done in two separate statements. You couldn't do it in a single statement. So you have to declare it first, and then in the next statement, you have to initialize it. Then T-SQL language elements, the expressions associated with the T-SQL language. Now, expression means that any calculation that you might be using. Like, for example, you just want to add two numbers. That is an expression. You simply say A plus B. So when we say A plus B, it will be simply writing it as A plus B. So when we say A plus B, it is an expression. So any mathematical calculation that you want to do, any function that you are using, or any concatenation that you are using, all these things, they are considered as an expression in SQL Server. So it basically combines the identifier, that is the variables, the values of the variables, and the operators that you are using. Like for example, A here is an identifier or a variable, plus is an operator, and in case we want to assign any value to this, so that value is basically considered as uh, this is now an expression. So A plus B is equal to 30 is an expression. So you can use these expression in your statement. These expressions, they can be used as a part of the select statement, or they can also be used as a part of the where statement. These expression, they can be single constant, or it can be a signed value, like for example, a positive value or a negative value. It can be a function, or it can be simply a variable. Or you can also combine a function output with a constant. Like here, when I say select year order date, this is a function that is being used. This year function will be just picking up the year value from the order date, and we are adding 1 to it. So if the year value is 1995, adding 1 to it means it will display us 1996. Similarly, here in this case, we are using the column names. So quantity is a column name. Unit price is also a column name, and you can calculate this expression quantity into unit price to get the total amount. So this is also an expression. So that means that any calculation that you are using within your select statement or within your where statement, that is considered as an expression. And this expression can include any constant value, like one is a constant. It can include any function, like here is a function. It can include column names, or it can include any operator, like plus, minus sign. They are all operators. Now, T-SQL language elements, we are discussing about controller flow, errors, and transaction. Now, controller flow statements or errors or transaction, they are basically being used to perform any kind of programming logic within the SQL statement. So, control flow statements are basically used to perform any kind of decision. In case you want to repeat any kind of task, you can use the while. So that kind of statements are basically used within the programming portion of the SQL language. Like when we are writing a stored procedure, or when we are writing a function, when we are writing a trigger, in those scenarios, we can use these control flow statement. If else statement is basically used to make a decision to execute a particular statement selectively. So that means that you specify a condition. If a condition is a true, then that statement will be executed. Otherwise, it will not. Then while is used in case you want to perform a task repeatedly. So if you have 10 records and you want to one by one check them for a particular value, then you can do that within your while loop. Then break and continue statement, they are used as a part of the while statement. In case you want to come out of the loop, or you just want to move to the next value within the loop, you can use the break and continue statement. Begin and end, they define the code block within the SQL logic. So in case you want to execute multiple statements in a single block, then you can include those statements in a begin and end within the while or within if else clause. SQL Server allows you to perform error handling also, because when you are performing some kind of programming logic, you may encounter some errors within that. The error may be because of your code, the error may be because of the wrong input or unexpected values from your tables, or the error may be simply because of the lost connectivity with the server. So we can handle those errors with the help of try catch statements. Then it also includes the transaction control statement. Now, what is the transaction? Any idea? Anyone? What do you mean by transaction? Okay. A transaction is basically uh, any kind of operation that you are performing within your table, like you are adding a new record, you are modifying existing record, you are deleting a record. All these changes that you are performing on your data, they are considered as a transaction. Now, sometimes it does happen that we want to perform those transactions as a single unit. Like for example, you are maintaining a bank account, and you are maintaining a database for bank account. A user or a customer basically transfers some of his funds from one account to the other account. So in that operation, in that transaction, a debit must be performed in account A, and the same amount of credit must be performed in account B at the same time. Now, these two statements, one is adding the value and the other one is subtracting the value. Now these two, they must be executed as a single unit. Now imagine what happens if amount is debited or subtracted from one of the account, but it is not credited to the other account. So what will happen in that scenario in case you are executing them as a two separate statement? Now, transaction control, it basically controls such scenarios where multiple statements, they must be executed as a single unit. Both of these statements, they will be completed together, or in case there is any error in any of the statement, then both of them, they will be rolled back together. So that means undo will be performed, and in case any amount is being debited, it will be credited back to the account A in case you are using a proper transaction control. So transaction control usage is not automatically done. You have to implement within your programming logic to ensure that uh, simultaneously changes are being performed or are rolled back at the same time. Now we come to the last section of this SQL element, that is comment section. Now the comment section is basically allowing you to add comments within your data. We can have multi-line comment and we can have single line comment. Now these comments, they help you as a programmer or as a SQL query writer to understand your logic, and in case you are maintaining a SQL file, it helps you to understand that later on when you open that file, that what kind of command you have written, what is the purpose of this command. So it is basically informative text that is for future reference for you or your team members in case they refer the same SQL file again. So we can have multi-line comments. Multi-line comments, they begin with a forward slash and asterisk, and they are closed with an asterisk and a forward slash. They are also known as a block comment. That means you must write them at the beginning of the editor. Whereas inline comments can also be specified. They can be specified at the beginning or at the end of your statement. They must begin with a double hyphen. So you can have inline comments as well. Now these comments, they basically depends upon the SQL editor that you are using. Now these are the default comments that are used by the SQL Server Management Studio. That is the SQL editor that we are going to use. Next is the batch separator. Now, after the comment, we are discussing about the batch separator. As we discussed that the statements in SQL, they must be executed as a batch in case you are using the variables and you are declaring and using them, they must be performed in a single batch. Now, you can ensure batches within your T-SQL file. Sometimes it does happen that we are using a long SQL file, and in that case the statements are defined such a way that they must be executed in their own separate batches. Now in that case, SQL Server provides a tool, or you can say a statement, that is known as a go keyword. So you can use the go keyword as a batch separator within your multiple SQL statement in case you are maintaining a single file that contain all your statements, because some of the statements, they require that they must be executed in their own separate batches. Like for example, you are creating a stored procedure and you want to test that stored procedure. Now creation of a stored procedure and testing of the stored procedure, they must be executed as a separate batch, not as the same batch. Now, there is a reason for this. We will be discussing that reason when we are going to discuss this scenarios in our course in detail. Now, these batches, they are basically determining the scope of your variable, like up to which particular area you can use the variable. They help you to perform a name resolution, that is a variable once being defined. You can use the same name after a batch separator is being used. Otherwise, you cannot use the same variable name twice in the same file. So we can use go statement as many times within our SQL script file. Now, let me just go through the course outline here. Within this course, this is just a portion of the course that we have just discussed of the introduction to TSQL querying. Uh, this particular entire course is spread over several modules, like for example, writing the queries, querying multiple tables, sorting and filtering the data, working with SQL Server data types, using DML to modify the data, using existing built-in functions, using grouping and aggregation, using subqueries. Then we also have something called table expression, set operator. Then these are the functions specifically used for statistical analysis like window ranking function, offset function, aggregate function. We have functions to pivot and unpivot the data, then grouping sets, then what are the stored procedures, how to use the stored procedure. This portion here, it briefly discusses the programming elements of the SQL language. Then we also discuss about the SQL Azure, that is how to work on SQL in the cloud platform. Then there is a bonus modules here like improving query performances and querying the SQL Server metadata. Now this entire course is spread over the duration of 40 hours uh, in basically a regular environment, basically in a regular track. Now, in case you have any question and answer, you can ask me that.